Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center at the Consulate General of India in Durban, Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Sri Sham Parandeji, revered Swami Ramakripananda ji, Sri Atul Tiwari ji, Sri Rajesh Karat ji, Sri Roshan Kublal ji, Cheryl ji, Piyush ji, distinguished guests, and online members. Welcome to the fifth day of Gandhian Perspectives and the 5 facets of Indian culture, with today's topic being service or seva. Seva is a Sanskrit word meaning selfless service and perhaps considered the most important part of any spiritual practice. It lies at the heart of the path of Karma Yoga, selfless action, and asks to serve others with no expectation of outcome. Gandhiji has taught us and has practiced this form of service where he teaches us to serve the needy, as service to man is service to God, be it of their caste, creed, religion, or culture. Gandhiji says, and I quote, "The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others." To begin today's program, our first guest speaker is educator and social worker, Mr. Roshan Kublal from Durban, South Africa. Welcome, Mr. Roshan Kublal, for your remarks.
Namaste and greetings to revered Swamiji and to each one of you. I acknowledge the presence of each person present or listening in. Thank you to the Indian Consulate Durban, Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, in particular, Dr. C.P. Yogi and his team for giving me this opportunity. Gandhiji said, open quote, if you want to discover yourself, get lost in the service of others, close quote. He also said, open quote, there is enough in this world for every man's need, but not enough for man's greed, close quote. And he even said, open quote, an ounce of practice is worth more than tons of preaching, close quote. Gandhiji said much, much more, but let's look only at these three. Let's paraphrase the last one in terms of seva. An ounce of help is worth more than a ton of pity. This means do seva. For those who may not know the meaning of seva, in simple words, seva is helping those who are in desperate need, be it material, financial, or emotional support. It can also be inspiring people so that they move from desperation to some degree of sustainability. Do seva and see how you feel. Is bloating, then you're not doing seva. You are only nourishing your ego. You are becoming an eye specialist. If the seva you're doing teaches you more about the plight of the poor and disadvantaged and urges you to do more and makes you realize that you are an instrument of God, then you are doing seva. If your seva teaches you to humble yourself and appreciate what is around and realize you are only the caretaker of what you have. The world is one big family, and we need to take care of the universal family members who are in need. Seva must teach you to bring on board others who are looking for opportunities to serve without any thought of receiving anything in return. If you're doing seva, don't look for thank you, don't look for rewards, don't look for recognition. As the saying goes, the right hand must not know what the left hand is doing. Seva is also a form of ahimsa. By doing seva, we are reducing the aches and pains of indirect violence through poverty or lack of education or unemployment or poor governance. Violence takes various forms in life. If people are hungry or jobless, that is a form of violence. If people are robbed or exploited, that too is a form of violence. The definition of violence is not restricted only to the physical definition that most of us are accustomed to. Hence, Sarva helps people to feel better. If you feel better, you are happier. Sarva puts hope in people's lives. The acts of Sarva becomes a catalyst for a better humanity. The Sarva legacy of Gandhiji is well and alive at the Phoenix settlement. The very name of the house, Sarvodaya, meaning for the benefit of all. If I have all that I need and you don't have all that you need, then all are not benefiting equally. So we have to find ways to bring in some balance of benefits. Sarva gives that balancing opportunity. The size of Sarva act does not matter. The smallest act can have the greatest impact. Research has shown that sincere participants in Sarva release oxytocin, a feel-good hormone. The receiver too feels that oxytocin release. The observers too feel the release of oxytocin. Sarva has a ripple effect of making the world a better place. In life, we have to do good karma, that is, good acts, acts that benefit others, especially if others are not related to you by way of family. In other words, perform good deeds for the members of humanity. By doing Sarva to humanity, although you are not looking for returns, it is a win-win situation. The giver is a winner because she performs a good act, an act of charity, while the receiver also wins because that person's pain and suffering is reduced. Sarva thus makes the world a better place. The flagship Sarva project at Phoenix Settlement Gandhi Ashram in South Africa is the Mahatma Gandhi Computer Education and Information Technology Center. Since its official opening, the Computer Center has served over 4,000 candidates. On behalf of all the beneficiaries from far and wide, we want to say our big thank you and our gratitude goes to the government of India, who saw this 21st century need and did their Sarva by financing the establishment of the center. We have many success stories. One person bought a computer and a printer, but he did not know how to use it. By doing the 4 basic courses that we have there, the young man was then equipped to start his own secretarial service business. Another young lady was called for a selection test for a 3-year course. She was able to showcase her skills and was selected to attend a 3-year course at Sivananda College free of charge. We must also acknowledge the inputs and efforts of Mr. Kedar Ramgovind, Dr. Ila's son, who is a mastermind in the setup and the maintenance of the center. The Magic IT Center also serves as a venue for various causes to empower the people living around Gandhi settlement. Other Sarva projects at Mahatma Gandhi settlement in Phoenix are senior citizens clubs, distribution of food, parcels, blankets, and other necessities, various forms of skill development, partnerships with other organizations so that they can use the infrastructure to render their Sarva. Some of the organizations are the Art of Living, Sukhyo Mahikari, Religions for Peace, Sarva Dharma Ashram, ACT, the Baha'i Community, the Chambers, the Phoenix Child Welfare, Ananda Marga, and the Indian Consulate. India has thousands of Sarva projects. If I may refer to just one, for example, the Jaipur Foot Project, which empowers people with prosthetics. So on the theme of Sarva, we lovingly invite people to come and join us at Gandhi Settlement, or wherever you are in the world, do engage in Sarva. May the legacy of Sarva grow bigger and better all over the world. Let us all do Sarva. The smallest act of kindness makes a world of difference for the better. Sarva is one of the gateways to God realization. Sarva is the most powerful, most practical, and most humanly beneficial act of recognizing our universal brotherhood and sisterhood and our responsibility. Service to humanity is service to God. Let me conclude with Swami Vivekananda's words on Sarva. Open quote, "There is no higher virtue than charity. The lowest man is he whose hand withdraws when receiving, and he is the highest man whose hand goes out in giving. The hand was made to give always. Swamiji also said, open quote, this life is short and the vanities of the world are transient, but they live alone who lived for others. The rest are more dead than alive. Close quote. And finally, Swamiji said, I will tell you in plain language that you work best when you work for others. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you so much, Mr. Roshan Kublal, for all your initiatives and your very enlightening remarks today. Our next guest speaker joining us from India is Professor Rajesh Karat. Sir is the Dean of Humanities, the University of Mumbai. Welcome, Professor Rajesh Karat.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Shamji Parande sir. Thank you, Yogi sir. Thank you, Roshan Kubal sir. Thank you, Srishti. Thank you, everybody, for giving me an opportunity to share some thought, some Gandhian perspective about Seva. Maybe I won't go in the philosophical manner, but since being from the education institutions and they practically serve to the many institutions within India and within Maharashtra. Whatever experiences I had with the Seva as a concept, I'm just sharing those thoughts. Though I should not say much when we have the international coordinator Shamji for the Seva International, but still I would like to share my thoughts on Seva. So generally, the Seva, the concept which has come from the Gandhian perspective, what I understand is it's the idea about the to the institution, and more than that, it is a challenging the feudalism, the aristocratic structure of the society, and how we are going to stabilize or restructure those aristocratic that is through Seva, and we have a couple of examples all over India and also abroad. At the same time, the Seva also indirectly means to challenge the egoism, the ownership. Then at the same time, Gandhiji also suggested for the trusteeship model. So all these concepts will lead to the greater collective growth. How we are going to have the collective growth? While abandoning the Lord Master approach and adopt the Shepherd approach, because both the approaches are interrelated. So this should be reciprocal. So when we are discussing the concept of seva, which is a reciprocal, it is also indirectly destroying the inequality of the caste, class, and gender, the three component or three evil components of the society, where Mahatma Gandhi has literally hammered with number of concepts. Seva is one of the important that. So while highlighting his concept, service or seva, so these are the four issues: service to self, service to others, service to nation, and world service to the ecology and nature. I would like to discuss more about the village panchayat system or the concept of the gram sevak, which was coined by Mahatma Gandhiji in 1920s or 1930s after coming from the South Africa, because he has focused more on the village and how the village revenue administrative system or the feudal families, they were actually ruling the over the village communities. So there they have decided now why not to have the seva as a concept or the sevak as a concept, and the concept of the gram sevak was divided, and the gram sevak, the concept is still is very much there in India. On the contrary, the gram sabha, panchayat samiti, village panchayat, it is very much existence in India because of the Gandhi, because the legacy of seva is there. Then the second concept about the seva, which is recently started, or maybe what I can think very much popularized, is servant leadership. Servant leadership, are we going to have exactly the leadership or the leader who becomes servant? So these are the questions which I would like to highlight. That at the same time we can see or understand the concept of in Hindi or in Sanskrit like Nokarshahi, that is the seva. The Nokarshahi is the bureaucracy. The rulers in the various administrative services or the administrative positions, whether in India and abroad, particularly in India, I'm highlighting, are they really becoming the sevas or the sevaks of the people? We have to find out the answer whether the Mahatma Gandhi's ideas of the seva has been successful or not. If it is successful, to what extent? If it is not successful, why not? We have to find out these answers. So, because when you are discussing about the seva or the sevak as a concept, the power which is given by the constitution or which is given by the number of rules and regulation has to be distributed, which has to be delegated to the masses, so that automatically the self rule, the concept of self rule also comes in picture when you are discussing about the seva. So I would like to highlight the few examples. Much before the India's independence, or much before the any princely state has adopted about the concept of the seva or gram sevak, in Maharashtra we have the Aund estate, Aund princely state, where the Bhavan Rao Pant, or who is the father of the very famous diplomat, who is very well known in the African countries, particularly Kenya and Egypt and many other countries, Appa Pant or AB Pant. His father, Bhavan Rao Pant, he has started introducing the Gram Sevak as a concept for his village. He has surrendered all his power and he has become a true follower of Gandhiji. And he has literally given speeches to the many places, villages, tehsils, and the district places. You have to follow Mahatma Gandhi's ideology about the seva. So the seva concept, which has started actually implementing 1930s and 1932, and since then, that particular village become one of the model for the Mahatma Gandhiji. And then later on, Mahatma Gandhiji's disciple Vinoba Bhave also adopted this concept of seva. And later on, we can see we have the number of people, number of disciples, number of organizations and institutions, and the government mechanism also introduce the seva as a concept, as a dedication to Mahatma Gandhiji. Lastly, I would like to draw your attention the concept of seva. What are the implications? What are the implications of seva if you are going to repeat in the developing countries, in the international level? If you don't do that, then how we are going to fill the gap between these rich and poor? Okay. So the seva, what I see, the concept given by Mahatma Gandhiji should become a tool of the diplomacy, or the instrument of the diplomacy, and should uh, convey or the campaign the Mahatma Gandhi's these particular aspects. That would be a dedication, or that would be a kind of samarpan to Mahatma Gandhi's ideology. Thank you for inviting me and sharing my just stay thoughts. I thought I can share this rather than what he said. Thank you once again.
Thank you so much, Professor Rajesh Karat, for your enlightening remarks as well. Our next guest speaker is Mr. Atul Tiwari. Mr. Atul Tiwari is a dialogue writer and actor for the Indian film industry. He's worked with some of the movies such as Mission Kashmir, Three Idiots, PK, Exotic Marigold, Akrosh, just to name a few. We would now like to welcome Mr. Atul Tiwari for his remarks.
Thank you, Srishti, and my gratitude to Swami Vivekananda Center and Indian Consulate in Durban, Dr. Yogi, and my fellow panelists, and my pranams to Swamiji. When the first anniversary of India's independence arrived on the 15th of August 1948, a set of 4 color stamps with Gandhiji's pictures was issued. The word Bapu in Hindi and Urdu was printed on the 2 top corners of that stamp. 3 of them, these stamps, were of the denomination of 1.5, 3.5, and 12 annas. And the 4th was a limited edition of 100 stamp. It was valued at a whooping rupees 10. The word service was printed on the top of this stamp. This was supposed to be used only by Sri C. Rajagopalachariji, the then Governor General of India, because nobody else could have afforded to use a stamp of rupees 10 those days, which translates roughly to rupees 3,300 today. But what is noteworthy here is why the word Seva was chosen to be printed with Bapu's picture on that stamp. Well, they could have chosen so many words like father of the nation, ahimsa, satyagraha, truth, brahmacharya, swadeshi, so on and so forth. But either Rajaji himself or the then Postal Telegraph Minister, Mr. Rafi Ahmad Kidwai Saab, chose the word, simple word, service, to be printed with Bapu's thing on that stamp. And why not? If you look a little deeply into the life of the man whom some people call the greatest living human being of the 20th century, you will find that Seva was what was his life all about. And as Srishti put it in the beginning itself, one who had said that the best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. This is not just a jumla for him. This was his life mantra, his moral compass, his pole star. The opening stanza of his favorite bhajan says it all. Vaishnav jan to tene kahiye, ye peer padai jane re, par dukhi upkar kare, toye man abhiman na aane re. The righteous man is the one who feels the pains of the others and wouldn't gloat over it if he does a kind act for others. How does this practically pan out in the life of the man who confessed, I'm not a visionary. I claim to be a practical idealist. Today, when we are all forced to live life in either a state-mandated lockdown or in self-imposed isolation because of the COVID-19, this story is worth recalling, especially when we are holding this webinar from South Africa. When the Black Plague spread in South Africa, the afflicted people from Indian ghettos were shifted to an abandoned quarantine building where a single compassionate white nurse was taking care of them. There was nobody else, no doctor, nobody else. That nurse later on recalled, and what I'm going to read out to you is that one day when a small figure appeared at the door, I shouted, "Get out, this is plague." But the man quietly replied, "It's all right, I've come to help you." He went on straight to the sick people and bent over a dying man covered with vermin and maggots. I shouted again, "Leave him alone, I'm used to it." But the 30-year-old Gandhi insisted on accepting the sick man himself and whispered back, "He's my brother." And then, the nurse says, he went on to stay the whole night by the side of that dying man. Friends, after this encounter, Gandhiji went on to establish a camp hospital with few volunteers and an indignant doctor and saved as many lives as possible, though 82 of the 112 patients died, unfortunately. Today, when we know that many senior doctors too have been too scared to attend to COVID patients in India, especially, Gandhiji's example is worth remembering. Choosing between service of the needy or the danger of infection to himself, he chose the former. What gave him courage and strength was his belief that one who would serve will not waste a thought upon his own comforts, which he will leave to be attended or to be neglected by his master there. When the idea of service took hold of Gandhiji's life, it caused rapid changes in his lifestyle. The financial returns of a successful lawyer in South Africa, the European style of living, the complicated household, all these fell apart when they became obstacles for him in his path of community service. Him of resources of time, energy, and ability. Everywhere he began to see possibility to choose living for himself alone or living for the sake of others. He made time for the volunteer services in the midst of a legal practice, busy legal practice, and recruited an Indian ambulance corps we all know about to serve the British during the Anglo-Boer War. And there too he insisted on nursing and looking after everybody without discriminating on the basis of the color of the skin or caste of creed. Because he believed, and I quote, Service, like virtue, is its own reward, and one who practices it will rest content with it. This is very significant because slowly and gradually the word service has lost its original meaning. The word service comes from the Latin servus and servicium, which means to be a slave or doing slavery, especially towards the religion, religious devotion, or to the church and the people. In Sanskrit also, as our friends were explaining at the beginning, seva has to do with either performing prayers to the gods and goddesses or to attend to and help the people. If you put them together, it becomes what the 13th century great Kerala poet Baswanna said, the Lord's mouth is his moving men. Lord's mouth is his moving men. Feed them. The Lord will give you all. Bapu would say, my creed is service of God and therefore of humanity. But in the same breath, he warns us, service that savors patronage is no service at all. Back in India from South Africa as Mahatma, Gandhiji joined the Servants of India Society, which was founded by his political guru, Gopal Krishna Gokhale. This also inspired Gandhiji to start his own ashram, first at Kotrap and then upon Sabarmati in Ahmedabad. He called his ashram Satyagraha Ashram. But along with becoming a fresh center of a new kind of politics for Indian independence, it in reality became a Harijan ashram and a Khadi ashram. If it promoted the cause of giving equality and dignity to those of Indians who had been condemned by society as so-called low-caste untouchables, then it also propagated the use of charkha and kargha to give economic freedom to the country and work to the unemployed millions in the villages of the country. Bapu also established another ashram right next to Sabarmati ashram. This was specially dedicated to find the best practices for the disposal of the human waste. He called this ashram Safai Ashram, or abode of cleanliness. Here he experimented with a new ways to dispose of human excreta without burdening the lower caste human scavengers. For him, Hindi word Safai was an acronym made of three alphabets, Sa, Fa, E. सभी चीजों का फायदेमंद इस्तेमाल. Any environmentalist of today would have been proud. One of the greatest services that Bapu did here was that he tried to get the abhorrible practice of human scavenging abandoned and re-christian the so-called untouchables as Harijans, the people of God. Apart from this seva, Bapu went to Champaran in Bihar to launch his first Satyagraha. There too, along with fighting to get the draconian teen Kathia law removed, he started schools to educate children and adults. He went on personally to clean the Harijan villages and thus breaking the age-old rule of supposedly high-born people not entering the villages of the untouchables. Babu always believed that what you do as your designated duty is not a service. Seva is what you do beyond the call of your duty and without expecting the reward for that. I quote him, that service is the noblest which is rendered for its own sake. After the famous Salt Satyagraha and the Dandi March in 1930, Bapu shifted his base near Wardha. His humble, earthy, simple surrounding, much more. And he turned this new ashram into a kind of a laboratory where he experimented with either to unknown tools that would fill it a new utopian India. Soon, Siavgaon, a nondescript village 5 miles from Wardha, became Seva Gram, or the village in the service and duty. Here, Bapu would cook himself, clean himself, serve food himself, along with the Harijans, and used to tend to the wounds and put medicines to Shastri Paruchareji, who was in an advanced stage of acute leprosy. He also started Nai Talim and a Khadi Vidyalaya to train people to make the thread that will tie India. He even had the compassion for the animals here. He improvised a new kind of a tong to catch snakes without endangering them, and then he would go and relocate them in the jungle. This center of service, in the words of famous Gandhian economist J.C. Kumarappa, became, and I quote Kumarappa, Sevagram is the de facto capital of India, since service of the country is the function of a capital. Unquote. Now Bapu started to give more emphasis to social service. And apart from all other things that I listed before, he also became engaged in spreading Hindustani as a link language for the whole country. This is not a political agenda or a photo op for him, because no obstacle or failure could dampen his spirit of self-service. After all, he used to say, he who gives up action falls. He who gives up only the reward rises. Babu was caring even for those people that he was forced to oppose. When he went to England to attend the Round Table Conference in 1931, he decided to visit the mill workers of Lancashire. Millions of those workers had been rendered jobless as mills were in a shutdown, which was being blamed on Gandhiji's policy of rejecting the British-made mill cloth. The British government of the day advised him not to go there as it would endanger his safety. Nevertheless, he went there and met the angry workers face to face without any protective cover. He had a frank conversation with them where he said, I know that 3 million people are out of employment here for several months. But friend, in my own country, 300 million people are unemployed at least 6 months in every year. You tell me that there are days when you get only bread and butter for dinner. My people often go hungry for days on end without any food at all. Soon, those men and women were cheering Bapu, a man who had brought about their unemployment. This was possible only by the service of education that Bapu offered this group of his so-called enemies. How could this one frail man do so much service to the mankind? Perhaps what guided and goaded him was his second mother, the Bhagavad Gita. Bapu, who read Gita daily, tested its teaching. It said, do your allotted work, but renounce its fruit. Be detached, work, have no desire for the reward, and still work. This brings us to an interesting question of words, service and servant, or seva or seva. They are being touted so loosely and incorrectly in today. The emergence of the service sector is the latest example. Every barber and plumber and doctor and lawyer is, of course, performing an important paid service. But does that qualify to be called a service? Today in our democracy, there is a fashion of calling the elected representative of the people as sevaks. Gram sevak, Nagar sevak, Upapradhan sevak, Chief sevak, etc. During Bapu's time, it was imperative, as Professor Rajesh was telling us, that the Gram sevaks would not be paid anything. Their service had to be completely voluntary. They even were not allowed to ask for food from the villagers for whom they were working. Even Bapu's co-marchers at the Dandi March were carrying their own rations so that they wouldn't strain the resources of the villagers and the villages that they were to pass by. But today's so-called sevaks take their paychecks, daily allowances, and even their pensions happily. If Bapu was there, he would have reminded us, love never claims, it ever gives. Love ever suffers, never resents and never revenges itself. Perhaps, as my fellow Mumbaikar Rajesh had reminded us, if we have to resurrect the word service to its original meaning that Bapu believed in, maybe to begin with, we should and we could re-Christian our administrative and foreign affairs officials. I know I am talking to the consulate people as Indian administrative corps instead of administrative service, and Indian foreign cadre instead of foreign service. In South Africa, Bapu wrote, "My profession progressed satisfactorily. I was not satisfied. The question of doing some concrete service for my fellow men constantly agitated me." And so, this man from a fairly sound economic background and reputation jettisoned everything. From now on, his motive was, and motto was, renounce and enjoy. On the other hand, we have seen people acquiring and gathering as much as they can in the name of service of the people. Perhaps that's why a certain suit, which normally takes 6 square meters or 60,000 square centimeters of cloth, was auctioned for rupees 4.3 crores in 2016. Whereas 4 of Bapu's service stamps, adversioning tiny 24 square centimeters of paper, were picked up by a collector for rupees 5 crores in 2017. I think maybe the buyer had heard what Bapu used to say: service without humility is nothing but selfishness and egotism. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Atul Tiwari, for those very deep remarks. That also reminds me of a great saint, Mother Mary Teresa, who left Ireland as a Roman Catholic, was a Roman Catholic, to practice seva in Calcutta. Our next guest speaker is Swami Ramakripanandaji, who is the leader and founder of the Sarva Dharma Ashram in the south of Durban in a little suburb called Welbedat. The Sarva Dharma Ashram is a participative development program whereby the poor and needy are encouraged towards success. All programs are centered on the main idea of lift yourself by yourself. The Sarva Dharma Ashram is based in the government designated low-cost housing project of Welbedat, the community, although over the years this has grown into many more communities. And the ashram offers selfless attitude of love to serve and to serve with love. The ashram offers so many community projects such as feeding, primary health care clinics, clothes distribution, arts and craft workshops, health and fitness centers, dance and music classes, yoga and well-being camps, arts and cultural programs, just to name a few. We now would like to welcome Swami Ramakripanandaji for his remarks.
Namaste and Hari Om to everyone. To all you divine souls that are here, my pranams to every one of you. And to those who are listening also, my pranams to all of you. The word seva and service relates to, in our scriptures, as karma yoga. Now, we have different types of yoga. We have bhakti yoga, karma yoga, jnana yoga, all this yoga. But the word karma yoga is there. The word karma is in front of yoga. So when we do karma yoga, which is service to humanity, then we must be very, very careful, like our other speakers have just said, is people doing it for the wrong reasons. Let's take, for instance, a maid in the house. She gets employed by the boss of the house. And then the boss provides her with everything. And then she starts cleaning the house. After a few days and a few months, then she believes that she owns the house. And then she also thinks that now she is taking care of everything. Everything is shining. And if I don't do it, nothing is going to happen. You know so? And like that, when people start doing Sarva, they start developing this attitude, like our previous speakers said, is the great saints, they sat for many hours doing meditation and trying to find the path to God realization. And then they came out with that, where is God? When one sits for meditation, one comes to realize that everything is Bhagwan, everything is God. Then for realization, then when the great saints like Mahatma Gandhi, Ramakrishna, Vivekananda, Swami Shivananda, all the other saints and sages, they've realized that Aham Brahmasmi Tattvamasi, I am divine, everything is divine. And when we do our Sarva, we serve the divine in the person across us. But we must not become like the maids, you know, when as I was going back to the maid, when they, after a while, they believe that they now own the house and everything. And then they start telling your children, don't sit there, don't do that, don't make that place dirty. You know, I'm cleaning this house. But they don't realize that the boss is the one that is providing all that cleaning stuff. And if she wasn't getting all those stuff to clean the house, she wouldn't be able to clean the house. Like that, when we're doing Sarva also, we must realize that we are doing this Sarva, but everything is coming from the divine. The mother provides us with everything, and Bhagwan gives us the strength and energy to go on with our work. And we must not develop that same type of ego that if I am not here, nothing is going to happen. Or if I don't do it, then no one else is going to do it. If your maid gets fired tomorrow, you get another maid, and then you give her the same equipment, and that maid will also carry on doing the work. So what happens in our spiritual life, a lot of the people, they start doing Sarva, and then they get entangled in the material world. They start chasing after money, and they start doing things only for the material gains. And then they also, like the great saints like Mahatma Gandhi and all, they have said that when we do Sarva, we, as our speaker just spoke now, is that we shouldn't be getting any salary, any payment, anything from the organization, because when you do Sarva, it must be selfless. And when you do selfless Sarva, then you come to realize that divinity is everywhere, and only divinity is providing you with everything. And when you start serving, when you start giving, when you start to share your love with everyone, then you start feeling the pain of the others. Then you start feeling the oneness with that divine that is moving around you. And that is why at the Sarva Dharma Ashram we have so many projects, because the reason is as Sevadas, as children of God, as seekers, we, of course, we don't have so much of time to sit and meditate like the great saints like Mahatma Gandhi and Vivekananda and all the great saints. And for them now, for us to realize, they have already told us that God is right in front of you. I am talking to God in all his names and forms here in front of me. And that is why even Swami Shivananda writes his universal prayers. And at the middle of the prayer, he says, behold thee in all these names and forms. Behold thee in all these names and forms, and serve thee in all these names and forms. If you don't see Bhagwan in the person next in front of you, then you will not be able to serve that person. And when we are doing seva, we have to be so careful, because we said that karma yoga. If we do it with the wrong attitude, then we develop karma on us. But when we do it with the right attitude, selflessly, then the energy comes, the power comes, the strength comes, and you are never busy to serve. And you'll always be serving with love, and you will always be giving with love, and you have the energy to do everything and whatever you want, because you love doing it, because you are not doing it for any material benefits. You are doing it for that God that is in front of you. And when a child comes to you, you want to hug the child and just be close to the child, because you feel that you have a little divine in you. And we start serving in that way, and then you start drawing people close to you, because your energy becomes powerful, and your server itself starts to draw people to you. And they'll say, no, we have to go to Swamiji. We've got to see Swamiji today. And if we don't see him this week, we don't feel good. So that feeling must be there when we are doing that seva, like our great saints have done. When we go out to do things, when we go out to serve people, there must be that energy of love, that I am going there to serve. I'm not going to serve them, I'm going to serve myself. And when I'm serving myself, then I got to do it in that proper manner. And that manner is that whatever is good for the goose is good for the gander. If you are making prasadam, if you are cooking, and if you can't eat that food, then you shouldn't be serving that food. So when we cook, it becomes prasadam because you are chanting, there's music playing, or the energy is right because you are cooking to serve the needy children. And the child that is consuming the food is also feeling that energy, and they're also feeling that love, and they feel wanted, because there's so many children out here in this in our areas, in Chatsworth and in Welbedat and Savannah Park, Demet, and the places that we are feeding. They sit and they wait for you. They sit and wait with the bowls. And if you don't go, if you're late one day, something happens, then they start phoning. They get the people to phone to say, where's our food? We are waiting for the food. And like on Wednesday, we had a breakdown and the food was late. So we went around 4 o'clock, 4:30. We had so many phone calls. Even children are phoning to say, Swamiji, we didn't get our food today. And then that breaks your heart. Because when you start doing seva in the right way, you start feeling for the person, because you know that that child is waiting for the food, and because you had never taken the food to that child, you feel hurt. So you not eat whether you eat or you don't eat, but as long as that child must get the food, because that Bhagwan is standing there waiting for you. And this is how seva must be done. But what is happening in this modern world, everyone is starting some kind of seva projects. And then they all want fancy cars, and they want to drive cars, and they want to have vehicles. Then they also want to get a salary. And then the seva projects, monies come in. Half the money goes in only for them, or even 3/4 of the money goes in for the management side and for the running of the organization. And then 25% is going to the people. And the others are sitting, whether they're going to get the food or not get the food, they don't care, because empathy is not there. So when it comes to proper seva projects like the Mahatma Gandhis and the great Vivekanandas, they do seva in the right attitude, because they are ever waiting and ever willing to serve God in that person in front of us. And if they don't do the seva, you'll find that the great saints, if they don't do the seva, they will not sleep, because they feel guilty that they have not done their duty. Whether it's a great saints like Mahatma Gandhi and Swami Shivananda, they used to, even Swami Shivananda, if a patient came to him and not collected the medication, he would leave other patients and run towards that person to give that medication, because they know now he's done his seva halfway. And in the case of Mahatma Gandhi, he said, do selfless service. Because if you do selfless service, then only benefits are there. If you don't do selfless service, then there is no benefit. And when, like I was reading some of his books, and he speaks about how one should feel for the next person and how one should give to the next person. So I know everyone is speaking about the histories of the great saints and the Sarva. And for us, Sarva is the most important thing. Besides giving food to the child, and besides giving food to the poor and to all the dropouts of society, another most important thing is education. And we at the Sarva Dharma, we pick up the children from the streets and from their homes, or they stay with their grannies and aunties and whatever. And you see in the streets, our Indian people are taking their little babies and walking down the streets and collecting monies. And what are we doing to these children? We are making them beggars. So we try and grab them out of these people and take them to the school and enroll them, because we need the children to be educated. And if they are not educated, then we have a problem in our country. We have the same problem we're having now. But the ashram's duty is not only to educate the child in the material world, but also to educate the child in our spiritual dharma. And our Hindu dharma is the best dharma. Our Hindus' teaching is the best in the world, where we see God in all, we serve God in all, and we do things selflessly. We don't want, if I educate a child, I don't want the child to go now work for another 10 years to give me the money. I don't work like that. So, because you are just doing it without any attachment. You must have no attachment to Sarva. You serve somebody today for 10 years. We had a boy that was living here. He lived with me for 16 years. He just one day packed his bag and decided to go. I mean, we don't go and catch him now and say to him, I took care of you for 16 years now. You got to pay me all the money. But you served him while he was here. You gave him his meals, his clothes, his education, everything while he was here. So now that he wants to leave, let him go. But you have educated him. You did your most important duty. Your most important duty is to educate the child. You educated the child. You fed the child. You did your seva. You must do it without any attachment. So you go on. Then next person comes. You see Bhagavan in that person. You serve that person. And this is how seva must be done. And we all talk about seva, but to give it that flavor of selfless service, of surrender, and giving unconditionally, that is true seva. Hari Om Tat Sat. Jai Shri Ram.
Thank you so much, Swami Ramakripanandaji, for all the initiatives that you and the Sarva Dharma Ashram do for the community at large. Our next guest speaker is Shri Sham Parandeji. Sir is the International Coordinator for the Seva International and the Secretary General at the Antarashtriya Sahayog Parishad, India. We'd now like to welcome Shri Sham Parandeji for his insightful remarks on today's topic.
Well, at the outset, I appreciate the effort of the Swami Vivekananda Indian Cultural Center, Durban, for organizing this series of 5 panel discussions. And they all sum up into the seva. Like first was truth, satya. Whatever we do has to take us towards the ultimate goal, the truth. Samvedana, compassion. Without compassion, there can never be seva. Sujanshilata, the creativity. Without creativity, one cannot serve in an appropriate way or and an appropriate thing that is needed. Samvad, unless and until there is a dialogue between the beneficiary and the benefactor, the service or seva will not happen. Unless and until hearts come together, this is not going to happen. And of course, seva encompasses all that. Having said that, because earlier speakers have spoken so well about seva and the way Mahatma Gandhi put seva into his practice. So I'll also might be repeating what they have already said, or might share some of my ideas that are not yet expressed. You see, seva itself contains the value that we emphasize with service or seva, and that's selfless. He is a selfless, he offers selfless service or offers selfless seva. Now, it is emphasizing what seva already has. Because when we say seva, it itself contains the meaning that this is selfless, something selfless being offered. The word I find being used in Bhagavad Gita, in 4th chapter, 34th shloka, stanza, Bhagavan Sri Krishna says, Tadvidhi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya. The context is different. We need to understand what he is trying to tell us. When you are out, this is part of the Jnana Sannyasa Yoga, the 4th. He is trying to explain to Arjuna and through Arjuna to all of us that if you want to gain jnana or knowledge, you have to surrender to your Guru. Tadvidhi pranipatena, and know that go before your Guru. When you go, you suppress or control your ego. So one has to control the ego while we serve, while we offer seva. Many a times it so happens that people say, I will never like my hand to be like this, but all the time this. But I should always be a giver. But nobody knows that you have been bestowed by certain things by the divinity. So you are receiving something. Your mother, your parents, your society, everybody contributed to your personality. The ego has no place while we serve. Pariprashnena sevaya, he says, because when you are serving the Guru, you go and ask questions. Go on questioning the Guru. Why this? Why not this? Why not this? Why? What's the matter that you are telling me this? Unless and until you question, but then you should question with humility. And that's where the beauty of seva comes out. So we need to understand that seva itself has selfless service. The earlier speaker also, of course, quoted about Narsi Mehta's couplet that Mahatma Gandhi was very much fond of. He was all the time asking people to sing that. Vaishnava Janko Tene Kahiye. All those people, Vaishnava, who feel the pain of others. Help those who are in misery, but never allow self-conceit to enter their mind. It's humility. And with humility, we need to understand that sharing the sorrow of others or accepting the challenges that others are facing, trying to help them out, knowing that they are the Vaishnavas who are offering seva. So this is something that tells us that compassion is the basic value or quality that a person has to imbibe, though everybody is bestowed by the divinity with this quality. In my life, I have not seen a person without compassion. He may be a saint or he may be a criminal. Everybody has that value. It varies and gets expressed in different ways, in different times, at different challenges. So compassion is something that's common. And that's where we need to understand that without compassion, one will never serve. What other speakers or earlier Swamiji also talked about is the Vedantic value or Vedantic concept, precisely talking about. The whole creation is divine, living or non-living. And one needs to understand that when one serves somebody else, he has to offer seva with all humility and selflessly. Then alone, he will reach the destiny, the truth, the God, the Bhagavan, or whichever term you use. Because everything and everybody. And that's where I would like to quote Gandhiji also. Bapu used to say, or he has written, his Young India, for the poor, economy is the spiritual. Now listen to this. You cannot make any other appeal to those serving millions. It will fall flat on them. But you take food to them and they will regard you as their God. They are incapable of any other thought. This he wrote in 1927 in Young India, 5th May 1927. Similar concept was coined by Swami Vivekananda. Because there he talks of various gods. He says, calls them Daridra Narayana, the Narayan who is suffering due to poverty. Daridra Narayana. And Swami Vivekananda goes on to say, Daridra Devo Bhava. Let my God be the poor, the starving. They be your gods. Because you see them with your own eyes and you serve them. Rather than going to a temple and spending huge money there to achieve a God or reach a God that you are not seeing with your bare eyes. And here's a God or personification of God, the divinity that is before your eyes. This is the basic concept behind seva that one has to understand. When we offer seva, it's with the mind that I'm serving a person who is a God. And that's where Swami Vivekananda says, the beneficiary should stand up and allow the one who is serving to go down and serve. That's the basic concept, And that's where the Vedanta has to be, or the idea of the Vedanta has to be understood. I recognize no God except for the God that is to be found in the hearts of the dumb millions, who cannot express themselves, they're suffering. Gandhiji says, they do not recognize his presence, the God's presence, the divinity's presence. And I worship the God that is truth to seva of those millions. A similar idea that they are talking about, whether Swami Vivekananda or, and this is because Mahatma Gandhi or Bapu, and all his life, you look at, understand his life or mission of his life, and you understand that every of his idea was embedded into the tradition and culture of this land called India, Bharat, or whatever. The Indian tradition expressed itself through Mahatma Gandhi. That's where we need to understand. He further says, a life of seva must be one of humility. That I talked about, or that's where Bhagavan Krishna talked about. He who would sacrifice his life for others has hardly time to reserve for himself a place in the sun. Don't bother about your own existence. When you serve fully. And they say the most precious kind of seva is offering time. When you offer your time, you offer whatever you have, your intelligence, your skills, your power, the strength you have, and whole of you is offered. So that's where he's talking about that when you offer, don't think about something, you keep something reserved for you and then serve is not the way. Inertia must not be taken for humility, as it has been in Hindu Dharma. True humility means most strenuous and constant endeavor entirely directed to the service of humanity. God is continuously action. Yeah, this is something that another Vedanta couplet is there. God is continuously in action without resting for a single moment. If we serve Him or become one with Him, our activity must be as unwearied as His. He never gets tired. He goes on serving. And one has to serve like that. So this has to be one's life mission. We have our own, whatever professions or whatever we are doing. But beyond that, we also need to understand that there is something called life mission and serving others. Because every moment you watch Bapu and he serves somebody. He serves somebody. He tells that every day he writes that every day he offers a noble act. But it is not one noble act. It's happening at every moment. Atulji talked about Sevagram. I had the privilege of visiting Sevagram. It's a wonderful place. A couple of times, I was a young boy living in Nagpur. I used to bicycle down. It's just, 50 kilometers from Nagpur, 100 kilometers from Nagpur. And up and down, we used to spend time. It motivated us. Even now, we visit the place. And this is where the seed of Gram Swaraj or Grama Vikas happened. Bapu rightly eulogized the idea of Gram Vikas. What the villages of India, the poverty of India needs to be how tackled. Because 70% of India's population then and even now, 65% of India's population still today lives in the villages. We talked about the villages and the place was, and this is something I will also talk about. The place was offered because it was done with Sabarmati's mission, Sabarmati Ashram's mission. He wanted to move to the central India, and Jamna Das Sajadji, great philanthropist, a follower of Mahatma Gandhi, offered place. It was called Shegaon. Nobody was very satisfied with the name. Two reasons. Of course, there is another important place called Shegaon. But then more than that, it needed a title that will attract everybody. Rightly, Bapu named it Sevagram. There is a university for rural development. There is a medical college. It has now all the things that one needs for the development of this country and globally for the establishment of peace or the values Bapu lived for. He talks about seva is not possible unless it is rooted in love or ahimsa. Without love, this cannot happen. Without compassion, this cannot happen. You have to love the person you are serving. If you don't love the person, the serving or the seva will not come off well. True love is boundless, like the ocean, and rising and swelling within one spreads itself out and crossing all boundaries and frontiers envelops the whole world. This seva is again impossible without bread labor. Swami Vivekananda says, you cannot preach religion on empty beggings. Babu is recollecting that or re-expressing that. This seva is again impossible without bread labor, without bread, without bellies filled, because it's spiritual for them. For us, who have been eating, who have been enjoying life, we have our own spiritual and our gods and do things. But the people who are suffering or hungry cannot be like that. Otherwise, described in the Gita as yajna. Gita calls this, Bhagavad Gita calls this as yajna, and he says that it is only when a man or a woman has done bodily labor for the sake of seva that he or she has the right to live. This is exactly earlier speakers have explained. They alone live who live for others. The rest are more dead than alive. It's like that. Mahatma Gandhi is saying, one has to be present in this world. The easiest method of offering seva is offering money. You offer money, you offer donation, and you regain that. You take out of your pocket, and next moment, it comes to you. That's not the seva, that's precious. The precious one who goes out in the field, a village, or a place, or a seva, a slum, find kids or people who are in need, identifies the need, identify what exactly they need. It is not like, I have a lot of things, I am a good teacher at maths, and I will go and teach. I am a doctor, or I have something, I can help in offering them help. But they don't need it. Who are you going to offer them? You have to understand that seva is need-based. And when you do that, you go there, you serve, and you enjoy. I always talk when I'm talking to the youth and trying to motivate them. I tell, you go serve them. Because many of the people say, like Gandhiji writes, that when we go to the slum, we talk to them, they don't need, education we offer, but they are not sincerely learning. They are playing, they are doing all the nasty things that they can, the kids. But they don't understand that we need to exactly find out how to do that, where to do that, and the way they can connect their hearts. One, you start loving them, you connect their hearts to your heart. This won't happen. Gandhi did all this and established the ashram, Charity, of course, I have an anecdote that I need to share with all of you. Gandhiji was in a different context. He was in Orissa. It was a huge rally, political rally for independence. The attendance was into thousands, tens of thousands. And there, before 1942-43, Gandhiji announced that this invitation now needs money also, funds also. So he appeals to the people present there and the country through that meeting that you should support this movement financially. So people started announcing one after the other. There were a number of rich people, and they started donating. Somebody lakhs, somebody million, somebody 10,000, somebody 100. And after the meeting was over, Bapu saw that there was some volunteers stopping people from reaching Bapu. The crowd management thing, of course. But amongst the crowd, Bapu saw an old lady standing in the crowd and was trying to push herself to reach Gandhiji. Gandhiji asked somebody who was around him, get that lady. They said, no, but she's a very poor lady. So what? She wants to come, get her here. They bring her here. Jamnalal Bajaj was standing next to Bapu. And when the lady comes, and she, in her pallu, the corner of the sari, there are certain coins she had. She opens up that pallu, takes out the coins, offers to Bapu. Bapu, this is all that I can offer. Bapu says, your sacrifice, your donation is the most precious for us and all of us and the country. Jamna Das Bajaj asked, but Bapu, you did not talk to me. You talked to a person who has brought a couple of coins and I donated 1 million. Bapu laughed and tells him, when did we eat last? She has something to offer. This is what Seva means. And that's where Bapu is very focused. He understands the values so well. And this is what our come by a fair amount of wealth, either by way of legacy or by means of trade and industry. I know that all that wealth does not belong to you. He's always talking about prostitution. What belongs to me is to an livelihood, no better than that enjoyed by millions of others. The rest of my wealth belongs to the community and must be used for the welfare of the community. This is where the Vedantism again comes in. That we are the trustees of all the wealth that we own. We should use the minimum basic possible that we need to, and leave the rest. Expressing that idea. What I disapprove is an organization based on the force, which is the state. Now, precious part of action. Volunteering is something time. This is what he is talking about. And when he talks about, he is talking about the state, the governments. And government, very little good, is saying, I disapprove, is what I disapprove is on force. Because government forcefully does everything. Voluntary organization must be. So he emphasizes everybody to try to work through voluntary organizations. Government does what it has to do on that. Unless and until, if this country has to be developed, they need to offer volunteers. And volunteering is precious. In my childhood, while I was trying to understand all this, seniors used to tell us, share us a couplet that was a phrase that was very then. Makadar, Bana, Volunteer. This is in Vidarbha, of course, Nagpur area, very popular. Because the boy or the girl is not scared of it. It's not like that. Volunteer today a valued quality. And that one has to, that is what Bapu is trying to stress. He used to volunteer wherever he went, wherever within the country, and that's what we saw in southern Durban or South Africa. All his deeds were, he did not make money out of it. He offered his services or seva wherever he went without charging anything. And the last thing I need to talk about, because there, but then most process I referred to was Gram Sudha. The cities are capable of taking care of themselves. It is the village we have to turn to. We have to disburse them, disabuse them of their prejudices. Many of them have many prejudices. Their superstitions, their narrow outlook, and we can do so in no other manner than that of staying amongst them and sharing their joys and sorrows and spreading education and intelligent information among the education part. It's most through the education there will be awareness and to create a self-reliant society. The Atmanirbhar, the latest call by the Prime Minister of India, the Atmanirbhar, self-reliant. A beneficiary should not become a beggar. He goes on begging, he or she. He is getting something free. He or she should not think that, oh, it's coming from the society, let me enjoy. He should think that I have received something. I will be self-reliant. I will earn myself. I will work. I will strive hard to earn money and then share it with the next person who needs. A beneficiary should not be a should never be a beggar, but become a benefactor, and that's where the success of Seva lies. A project which makes turns beneficiaries into benefactors is the best available project. One needs to understand. It's Atmanirbhar or self-reliance that is most important that we'll have to establish or achieve. And this is all about Seva that I can talk about as far as possible. The activity will be conducted on the basis of cooperative. He says in Harijan, there would be no caste such as we have today. There should not be divisions in society. Society stand as one person without differences, without privileges, and help out people who are suffering, who are in need. And I'm proud to tell you that through the last 6 months, I have seen multiple organizations in India and Indians abroad, the Indian diaspora, wherever they be, they started serving in a great way. The society offered funds, time, the medics, and the paramedics, the frontline workers, everybody did it, offered Seva, was selfless all through. There were people, I have read reports, nurses returning home after 20 days, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. This is something, that our society carries. They stood, and I go before them because they had been doing this in all humility. No ego of what they did to serve during this challenging time of Corona. The Seva is so precious to all of us that we should pass on this value to the next generations. And this has happened in Bharat, in India, for generations together. The history is full of Seva. Let us understand that Mahatma Gandhi's mission that he lived for, one was, of course, independence, Swaraj, to Swadeshi, to Atmanirbhar Samaj, and Seva has to be imbibed and carried on to the generation and next generation. Understanding Seva and through Mahatma Gandhi's life is the simplest way of understanding. Thank you for offering me this time. Thank you to Swami Ramkripanandaji to be here with us, Yogi ji for organizing this, and his team, the whole team. We did a marvelous job. And I offer namaskar to all my co-panelists. Namaste.
Thank you so much, sir, for those deep insights. We would like to now come to the conclusion of today's program, and I call upon Ms. Cheryl Banwari Lal to render this afternoon's vote of thanks on the topic of service for Gandhian perspectives and the 5 facets of Indian.
On behalf of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, the Consulate General of India in Durban, I would like to express deep gratitude and appreciation to our guest speakers, Mr. Roshan Koblal from South Africa, Mr. Rajesh Karat from India, Mr. Atul Tiwari from India, revered Swami Ramakripanandaji from South Africa, and Sri Shyam Parande from India. Thank you once again for taking time off your busy schedule to join us today and sharing your immense knowledge with us. I would like to say a special thank you to Dr. Chaitanya Prakash Yogi, Director of the Swami Vivekananda Cultural Center, Ms. Shisti Harinarayan, and Mr. Piyush Khandewa. Stay home and stay safe. Thank you.